Hey, and welcome back to my Startup Success series, where I cover the history and lessons from some of the world's leading companies. You asked for it, I listened. So today's spotlight, Nvidia. Nvidia was started in 1993 by co-founders Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowsky, and Curtis Priem. They started meeting regularly at Denny's, the restaurant chain, to brainstorm ideas. This was during the microprocessor revolution, and they knew that in the future, computing power would be important. So in one of those meetings, they decided to build a company that would pioneer a new way of doing computing. That became the company mission, and Nvidia was born. Fun fact, today, Denny's has a booth dedicated to the Nvidia origin story there. Since this was before computers were actually in people's homes, none of them had seen a personal computer before. One of the first things they did was go and buy a PC, the Gateway 2000. Once they had a PC in hand, they decided that their first product was going to be a new 3D graphics chip for PCs aimed at the video game market. So let's break that down for a second. Their prediction back then, which was correct, was that once computers became widely accessible to everyday people would want to play games on them. To play games, having 3D graphics would be really cool. And to have 3D graphics be possible, they had to develop a new type of computer chip because the existing technology was just too expensive. Next, they had to raise money. To do this, Jensen met with his ex-boss and LSI Logic CEO, Wilfred Corrigan, and pitched him on the business. Apparently, Wilfred said it was the worst elevator pitch he'd ever heard, but then picked up the phone and called his biggest investor, Sequoia Capital's founder, Don Valentine, and told him, I'm going to send a kid your way. I don't know what he's doing, but I want you to give him money. He's one of the best employees LSI Logic has ever had. Turns out the meeting with Don didn't go great either, but he did give Jensen money and notoriously said, if you lose my money, I'll kill you. Jensen shares this as a really important lesson for founders. In the world of VC funding, your reputation precedes you. That is the most important thing. You can be a first-time founder pitching a crazy idea. You can even have a bad interview, but you can't run away from your past. So have a good past, he says. Once they had the money in hand, they got to work on building their first computer chip, which they called the NV1. This turned out to be a failure, and they almost went out of business. It was just too complex, and they tried to do too much all in one. Luckily, they had already been developing their second chip in parallel, the NV2, and had signed a partnership with SEGA, the video game company. So they were generating some revenues from that. But in 1995, they almost went out of business for a second time. Microsoft released Windows 95, which ended up not being compatible with the architecture that they'd been using to develop the NV1 and NV2 chips. All of a sudden, they were faced with two just bad options. They could drop the contract with SEGA and run out of money. They could continue with the contract with SEGA, but then spend 2 years working on the wrong architecture and go out of business. So do you die now or die later? They ultimately decided to meet with SEGA's CEO and just sincerely explain the situation to him. They asked him to cancel the contract but continue to pay them in full. And he did just that. And that saved Nvidia for a second time. They had one more shot at creating a breakthrough new computer chip. In September 1997, Nvidia released their third chip, the NV3 chip, more commonly known as the RIVA 128, and it was a huge success. They sold 1 million units in the first 4 months. They'd finally found product market fit. In March 1998, they partnered with TSMC to manufacture their chips. In January 1999, Nvidia went public. In August 1999, they released their fifth chip and first ever graphics processing unit, or GPU for short, which they called the GeForce 256. But by the year 2000s, competition was starting to catch up. So in 2006, the company released CUDA, a new software toolkit. The bottom line is that CUDA inspired other people and companies to start using GPUs for things other than video games. In 2008, Andrew Ng, a Stanford researcher at the time, became the first person to pioneer the use of NVIDIA GPUs for AI and deep learning. Then in 2012, a computer program called AlexNet used NVIDIA GPUs to process and recognize images far better than had ever been done before. This became a pivotal moment in the history of AI and also put NVIDIA on the map as one of the key players. Seeing the early potential, Jensen decided to completely pivot the company away from their core business of computer graphics and video games and towards AI computing. As AI took off over the next 10 years, so did NVIDIA. And this is the NVIDIA that we all know today, the computing engine that's powering Microsoft's ChatGPT, Mercedes self-driving cars, Amazon robots, and more. The future of NVIDIA looks brighter than ever. If you found this valuable, make sure to follow me for more content like this, and let me know in the comments which company you'd like to hear about next. Bye-bye.